Avital Ronell's work has been depicted as a striking hybrid of high theory and street talk. As a philosopher, she has written about a wide variety of issues, from politics and violence to drug addiction, technology and stupidity. Avital Ronell, welcome to Euronews.
Thank you for having me.
We have been witnessing a series of disasters. The latest one was the tsunami in Japan. Are man-made disasters the next big challenge for humanity?
The problem about disasters is precisely one of our objects of reflection in the program that I direct. And the question is often one of determining what man-made is and whether there exists at all natural disasters. That might sound very strange, but we're interrogating all the terms that lead us to think that we have any control over what constitutes a disaster, any understanding, and whether our knowledge systems until now can actually account for, predict, and analyze, help understand what happens when a disaster hits.
That's precisely what's happening in Japan. Everybody feels there is no knowledge.
That's what I think is a big psychic distress signal that comes out of all this, is the degree of helplessness that in fact occurs and hasn't been answered to or provided for. In psychoanalysis, Freud made helplessness one of the major psychological attacks on the human being, the sense of, in German, Hilflosigkeit, being helpless. And we try to defend against that by building up all sorts of machinery, apparatuses, cognitive systems that pretend and claim to understand what's happening. And then when disaster strikes, if it's truly a disaster, all our systems have to be destroyed, because that's what disaster means.
In Ivory Coast, people are also facing a disaster. How do we deal with refugees from conflicts and political turmoil?
Well, this is a real question that has emerged in the long ago 20th century, which is to say the displacement and shift from the citizen to the refugee as the main agent or actor or victim, or depending how you want to see it, that we need to be attentive to. So our relation to the refugee is of utmost importance and needs to be brought to consciousness. There are refugees always suppressed and unconsciously avowed or not, but refugees, whether they're people without documentation, whether they're somehow illegitimate or outcasts or drug addicts and so on, refugees are the ones who are calling for help and require everyone's understanding. So right now, I would suggest that we all sit down calmly and read Derrida's work on hospitality, what he calls unconditional hospitality, creating hospitals and generosity to those who, I know this sounds a little out there and hippy-dippy, but it's not. All those who are less, let's say, afflicted by disaster need to figure out how to welcome the so-called refugee, because more and more everyone will become dislocated, homeless, and a refuse.
As a philosopher, do you think there are any lessons to be learned from the Arab Spring, the so-called Arab Spring?
Everyone should be sobered up, at least provisionally, because of course things, as with Obama, there was great elation and ecstasy and affirmation that yes, we can, yes, we did, and Obama is now president. There are forces beyond and reality principles that smack down any good intention and good conscience. So there's so much to be learned, but I guess if I would rewind, I'd say, first of all, some of the mistaken assumptions about what an Arab uprising would lead to or how it would come about where the power is. And also we can't just say Arab, because Tunisia, Egypt, all of these are Yemen, very distinct, very singular, very complicated moments that had the drift of contagion, and of course one sparked the other, but very differently each time and according to different motivations and needs.
In the middle of the turmoil across the Middle East, we are facing a sort of a standstill. Is everybody waiting to see what happens next before taking decisions?
Well, decisions are very heavy things to imagine. I think that decisions are being made every minute, and they might cancel each other out. They might be, this is the problem or the moment in every revolution or enormous change, that all the energy that was put into propelling change and compelling all sorts of rearrangements suddenly has to halt and be suspended for a moment. Also a moment in order to integrate what happened, a moment of disbelief, a moment of fear and anxiety. Now what? Now what? And I think that you have micro samples of that too in any relationship, that if something had a lot of momentum and then it reaches a certain point, you know, success, if this is a success, is something very traumatic too. Like, what? I made it? We made this revolution happen? Okay, and all our energy went into that kind of pulsion and movement. Now what? So I'm hoping that the standstill suggests reflection, resetting everything. I mean, there's a beautiful emergence of art in Tunisia and all that, with people's portraits all over the place and on buildings that are associated with repression and torture. You now have the new face of Tunisia and the Tunisians. So art, as in 9/11, suddenly everyone wrote poems and stuck them on the walls outside in New York or drew pictures. The place of the artist and moments of disaster is something that interests me.
Israel seems quite gloomy as well about the prospect of democracy in the Middle East.
I think Israelis tend to be pessimistic and concerned and reactive and violent and upsetable in so many ways. They have new neighbors, in a sense, and they want to see what that means. They've been historically very anxious about these things and very often distressingly paranoid. At the same time, there's a squeeze that we need to maybe look at more closely on a lot of people's, and a lot of people just sitting back and not helping out in any. I mean, there's so much that's warped and unacceptable in the Middle East, everywhere, that I would like to see a more serious and rigorous analysis come about. But sure, as I said in the beginning, democracy is always at risk. And Israel has introjected that sense of risk and has tried to somehow protect itself in ways that are not reasonable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.